First, before we dive into the session, I'm going to quickly share who I am and who LENA is so that you know more about why I'm here today. So again, my name is Caitlin Stafford, and I have been on the team at LENA for almost 3 years now. I'm also a mom of a 7-month-old named Henry. In my past, I've been a nanny, an instructor at an after-school math and reading program for preschool through high school children. And now in my role at LENA, I work with childcare centers, libraries, school districts, county and state level education departments, and many other organizations across the country to learn more about little brains and how we can best support learning and development. LENA is a nonprofit focused on building brains through early talk. We're based in Boulder, Colorado, but we have team members across the country. And our team at LENA includes researchers, speech language pathologists, curriculum specialists, engineers, and a host of other talented professionals. We work with families and teachers across the country to increase interactive talk with young children. Today, I'm going to share some of what we've learned about early brain research and development and the importance of increasing interaction in your own classrooms, centers, and schools in Louisiana. Our founders were inspired to create LENA over 15 years ago after spending decades in K-12 education systems working to address opportunity and achievement gaps. They knew that there had to be a way to help children enter school prepared to learn by starting in the earliest years of a child's life. And as you all know, our founders were right. Opportunity gaps start early and they persist through a child's life. A child who enters kindergarten unprepared is 25% more likely not to finish high school and 60% more likely to skip college. And each year in the United States, 4 million children are entering kindergarten. That's a lot of little learners out there. And of these, about 25%, nearly 1 million children, are arriving in the classroom without the academic, social, emotional, and self-regulatory skills they need to thrive at school. For low-income children, the reality is even harsher. So nearly half of those children, 48%, are struggling when they enter kindergarten. So at LENA, how do we address this challenge? All of our work focuses on these 3 truths. First, early interactive talk shapes a child's life. Second, parents and caregivers, including you, their teachers, are the secret sauce. Your daily interactions with young children are what make a difference for the rest of their life. And finally, you can't improve what you don't measure. Research at LENA shows that adults tend to overestimate the amount that we're talking with children. So knowing how much we actually are talking helps us set goals, make sustainable changes, and measure progress. If you have heard of LENA in the past, you've probably seen or heard about our technology. A lot of people call it a talk pedometer. Some people just call it a LENA device. And so there are communities around the world who are using this technology to measure adult words and back and forth interactions between adults and children in a variety of ways. So sometimes you may hear about LENA technology in home visiting. You might hear about it in parent groups. You might hear about it in deaf and hard of hearing communities. So there's a lot of applications for this technology to measure, again, those back and forth interactions between adults and children. And then feedback reports like the one pictured here give us that information about what's happening in a child's language environment throughout the day. And through that data, we're able to help teachers, parents, and caregivers see progress from week to week, as well as identify opportunities for growth and some of those insights and aha moments where we're really able to see what's happening, set some goals, and make some small changes to our daily routines. So that's why I'm here today to talk about research around early brain development. It's what we do all day, every day at LENA in all parts of our country and around the world. Because at LENA, we know that the earliest years of a child's life are critical and that each of you can make a huge difference in outcomes for Louisiana's littlest learners. At the end of our session, my hope is that you'll know more about recent research on early brain development and that you'll have information and ideas that you can use to put this research into practice every day with your children. One of the files included in the Sketch app, and I know a lot of people are looking for the handouts. So in the Sketch app or on the Sketch website, there is a section with documents for the session. So that includes the PowerPoint, it includes the handout and Talking Tips poster. We've also shared the handout in the chat. So if you aren't able to find the handout, you should just be able to scroll up through the chat and Stacy can post that again. So it's just a PDF that you can open up and have with you. And if you can't find it today, that's perfectly fine. You can find it later. Just maybe have a piece of paper if you want to jot down some ideas. But the file that Stacy just shared in the chat called Handout 3, you can use that as a note-taking sheet if you'd like as we go through different parts of our conversation today. So you can jot down questions you have if you want to make sure we get to those at the end. You can also go ahead and put questions in the chat. You can also put down ideas of things that you want to remember about how to use this information in your work day to day. So let's dive in with some basics that we know about early brain development. And when I'm talking about early brain development, a lot of what we're going to talk about today is really those first 3 years of a child's life, but even up to the first 5 years of a child's life. And so that's kind of my framework for when I say early brain development is 0 to 5, primarily 0 to 3. This topic, again, is really important because many adults, we overestimate the amount we're talking with kids, but we also underestimate the importance of our interactions with infants, toddlers, and preschoolers to their future social achievement, school achievement, not to mention their social and emotional development. But what we know now is that this time period really is critical, and it has to do with how those little brains are growing and how fast they're growing. The basic architecture or structure of the brain is constructed through an ongoing process. It begins before a child is born and continues far into adulthood. But we know that those first 3 years of a child's life are very, very critical. It's millions of neural connections are formed each second. Just really think about that. 1 second. It's over 1 million connections right there for a baby. Early experiences affect the quality of that architecture that's being built up by creating either a sturdy or a fragile foundation for future learning, health, and behavior that follow. As our brains grow, the connections that are being built are strengthened. And the connections that aren't used get pruned away in what's called synaptic pruning. So it's really that our brains are becoming efficient. They're learning what kind of information they need, what they need to be able to use and access quickly. And if there's something that our brains say, I don't really need to use that, it's not really that important to my everyday existence, it might just prune that away and say, that information just slows me down. And so I really want to get these pathways built and strengthened over time. And so for our brains, it is that use it or lose it situation. And we know that what is used and what is built early is going to be there for the rest of our lives. This, as a mom, just is always amazing to me when I look at my little guy. As he's sitting there playing with blocks or looking at a book, I'm just trying to imagine all of the things that are going on in his head, how he's putting together all of his senses to learn about the world and the people around him. When we're reading a book, his hands are touching the pages. He's seeing the pictures and words. He's hearing my voice as I read to him. Sometimes he's even tasting those pages when he sticks them in his mouth. But all of those things are creating and strengthening connections inside of his brain that will help him continue to learn new things, even when he's in high school. So really those moments that, sometimes we feel like we're too busy with things that are going on, we can just leave him right here while I go do this other thing next to him. And but it really is those moments that are small that can really make a difference for the rest of a child's life. We also know that the brain is most flexible or plastic early in life to accommodate a wide range of environments and interactions. So again, babies are taking in all of this that's going on around them, all of the things that their senses are picking up on, and they're figuring out what really is important to know and what's really going to be helpful to them. There's a researcher, Dr. Patricia Kuhl, who talks about how babies are incredible statisticians. They're learning what sounds they hear the most and what sounds they're going to need to know. And so they're really processing all this information and figuring out what's important for me based on how often it's happening around me and the people that I see and interact with. But as we grow up, the brain is becoming more specialized. So that's that pruning process to assume more complex functions. So we move beyond just moving from A to B and really having more logic and reasoning and being able to understand why we're doing things or how we're going to do things and planning. And so as our brain is developing and deciding which things are important and it's making space and reorganizing and adapting to new and unexpected challenges. But as we get older, our brains are less capable of doing that. In the first year of a child's life, the parts of the brain that differentiate sound are becoming more specialized to the language the baby's been exposed to. This is important because we want them to really be able to master their language, their home language, and communicate effectively. But at the same time, the brain is starting to lose the ability to recognize different sounds found in other languages. And while the window for language learning and many other skills remains open, these brain circuits just become harder to alter over time. And so that early plasticity or the ability for babies to brains to mold and form and learn new things, it's much easier for them than it is for us. And that means that it's easier and more effective to influence babies' developing brain architecture in these early years than to try to rewire parts of it later in life. So if we can set up a strong early foundation when their brains are capable of learning and developing and taking on new skills, it's much easier for us to make these impacts early than it is when we get into middle school and high school years. But while all these connections are happening and this great opportunity for development and learning, we also know that infants and toddlers are processing speech at 1/5 the speed of adults. So I know I can start talking really fast, but thinking about slowing down to 20% speed for my speech, it really means that we do need to slow down, tune in, and pay attention to how we're communicating and engaging with babies. Just trying to shower babies with more and more words and talk more to them isn't really the goal. We want to be creating meaningful, quality relationships that are responsive and nurturing so that we can make the most of this critical window for brain development. So how do we do that? While all of us are born with a blueprint for our brain, the experiences we have in those earliest years impact how those blueprints are expressed. So this is where more recent research on conversational turns or back and forth talk has surfaced in the past few years. Before we dive deeper into this research, I want to be sure we have a joint understanding of what interactive talk means. There's a space on the note-taking handout for you to put this in your own words, or again, feel free to use whatever paper you have sitting in front of you. In essence, interactive talk is like a game of ping pong. So one person offers a thought and the other person responds. Our goal is to keep that going back and forth as long as possible. Interactive talk allows for valuable information exchanges, and it helps both parties, both the adult and the child involved, to express themselves and to learn more about each other. You may have heard this type of interaction described as conversational turns or serve and return interaction. We'll be using these terms as well as early talk or interactive talk interchangeably as we discuss related brain research. And I like what Patricia said in the chat there, that this is important information when considering how much curriculum we're expecting in PK3. Our team at LENA is reading a book, I have it sitting right here, called The Importance of Being Little, and really talking about, it's great for us to make sure we have standards for quality and that we're, working hard to create a great experience for children. But we can't lose sight of the fact that they're babies and that they are children, and that the best thing we can be doing for them is paying attention, observing them, and finding ways to help stimulate all of this growth that is happening, because they are just soaking it all up. They're going to learn and their brains are going to grow and form regardless of what we do. So by providing those safe, warm, nurturing, interactive environments for them to explore and learn is really critical. So thank you for sharing that thought, Patricia. We often hear from caregivers and parents, though, that it can be really hard to talk with babies. We hear, well, they aren't really talking back. And it, thinking about our ping pong analogy, it's really hard to play ping pong if the person on the other side of the table doesn't have a paddle. But that's not really the case here. While young children may not be using words and sentences, kind of depending on what age range you guys are in, young children are naturally reaching out for interaction with babbling, facial expressions, and gestures. And we can respond with those same types of vocalizations and gestures back to them, as well as with our adult words. If I think about how this looks in my life, I think about mornings after my kiddo wakes up and he gets fed. We normally are playing quietly, sitting together, and I might say something like, "Oh, did you sleep good last night?" And I see a big smile come on his face. That's his return to my serve. I'm making eye contact, and through facial expressions, he's responding that he's enjoying our conversation. And then I might say, "Well, oh, what are we going to do today? It's going to be warm out, so we should make sure you have short sleeves on." And he might make a big squealing noise and start bouncing around. That's another response that includes both verbal and nonverbal expressions. And so it's really important for us to be tuning in and observing children so that we can notice when they are doing that return. No baby talk is required. Although we do know that children respond really well to the sing-songy language many parents just kind of naturally use, which exaggerates sounds. Sometimes it's referred to as motherese or parentese, as we think about the way that parents typically use that more exaggerated and fun language. One really important aspect of serve and return is that it works best when it's embedded in an ongoing relationship between a child and an adult who's responsive to that child's own unique personality. In the absence of such responses, or if the responses are unreliable, sometimes we respond, sometimes we don't, or inappropriate, like yelling, the brain's architecture doesn't form as expected, which can lead to differences in learning and behavior. Recent research has shown conversational turns to be one of the most predictive metrics of child outcomes. So when we look at all of the things that go into the human experience, there's a lot of things we can measure, from parental education to school demographics, or curriculums and after school activities, or family structure. There's a lot that goes into becoming a person. But when we look at, and it's hard to tease it apart, all of the different inputs and outputs. But when we do look at research, one of the things that is most predictive of children's future development and outcomes is conversational turns. So now we're going to talk about a string of recent studies that have indicated that conversations have more brain building power than adult words alone. So that's why you won't hear me or anyone at LENA talking about a 30 million word gap today. That term has increasingly become outdated due to the latest science, and it doesn't really capture the complexities of the early talk gap. Like I said earlier, it's not just that we want to shower babies with words and dump a lot of language on them. It's really that back and forth, that relationship that makes the difference. So let's talk more about this research and why those morning conversations I'm having with my little guy are so important. For many of you who work in the field of early childhood, we don't need sophisticated research to really prove that babies and young children need these responsive relationships with adult caregivers to thrive. If you spend any time at all with young kids, you can easily tell that they are more engaged, expressive, and happy when the adults around them are interacting with them. And for many parents and teachers, responsive caregiving is intuitive. When you hear a baby crying, your instinct may be to pick them up, start singing a song, or redirect their attention with a new toy or book. But neuroscience is now showing us exactly why this is true and giving us that research and evidence base to back up what we really need to be providing a quality learning and early life experience for these children. In 2018 and 2019, there were 4 studies published that use cutting-edge technology to tell us more about why conversational turns are so important and what these back and forth interactions are actually doing inside a child's brain. On your note-taking sheet, there is a section for you to write down any thoughts, ideas, or questions you have about these different research topics. But again, feel free to pop those into the chat as well. And we will answer questions as they come in, but also be able to share kind of how people are responding to this information. So in 2018, Dr. Rachel Romeo and a team of researchers at Harvard and MIT published 2 papers examining how conversational turns relate to children's brain structure, the way it's built, and brain function, how it works. The first paper shed light into the underlying neural mechanism that makes conversational turns so critical for early brain development. This identified a relationship between conversational turns and activation in Broca's area, a language center in the brain. And we will talk more about that study in just a minute. The findings in the second paper indicate that conversational turns strengthen white matter, which is the information highway of our brain. So by strengthening that white matter, conversational turns allow the whole brain to work better together, not just areas of language processing. Let's see, so using we're asking for the note-taking sheet in the chat box again. So if you scroll a little bit up, you should be able to see it, but Stacy can also drop that in again. There we go. Thank you, Stacy. All right, so the third study, in the fall of 2018, a 10-year longitudinal study was published by Dr. Jill Gilperson, head of LENA's research department, and a team of researchers she worked with. They were exploring how conversational turns in the earliest years of a child's life relate to a child's long-term outcomes. The study found a strong correlation between the amount of conversational turns experienced between 18 and 24 months of age and a child's verbal abilities, language skills, and IQ in middle school. That study really shows the impact you are having on children for their entire life. All of those conversations about the clouds you see when you're playing outside, the questions you ask during lunchtime, and how you teach them to wash their hands and sing songs is still making a difference when they're learning algebra and reading Charlotte's Web. And then the fourth study I'll mention is from Dr. Kim Noble and Dr. Emily Mertz, who worked with a team at Teachers College at Columbia University to study the relationship between family socioeconomic background, children's brain structure, and children's reading skills. The study was published in early 2019, and it found that children who experienced more conversational turns had greater surface area on the left parasylvian cortex in their brain, and that this resulted in better reading skills in elementary school. While adult words and conversational turns both affected brain growth, the effect size was 15% higher for conversational turns, really confirming that, again, it's about those quality back and forth interactions, not just the quantity of words a child hears. So let's look a little bit closer at that first study from Dr. Romeo. What's especially unique about this research is that they used scans from a functional magnetic resonance imaging, or functional fMRI machine, to actually see and measure the activity in the brain while they had children between 4 and 6 years of age engage in different language-based activities. fMRI technology measures brain activity by detecting changes associated with blood flow. So this technique relies on the very cool fact that blood flow inside the brain and activation of neurons in the brain are connected. So when an area of the brain is being used, so neural activity, blood flow to that region also increases. And so that's what we're able to see in the pictures, is that increased blood flow as that part of the brain is being used. Dr. Romeo joked that getting the children to sit still for the brain scans was one of the most challenging parts of this study. So for those of you who work with young children, you can sympathize with Dr. Romeo's statement that a lot of young children don't have a strong sense of bodily awareness. You tell them to sit still and they think they're being still, but they are literally waving their arms in the air. As I think about my 6-year-old nephew and 4-year-old niece, I'm trying to get them to lay very still inside of a tube while we're reading them stories. Sounds like it would be very difficult, but they were able to do this fantastic study with children in the Boston area. And the brain scans that we see here on the right side of the screen are from 2 girls who were the same age, and they were from similar households in the Boston area. So parents had similar education level, similar household income. The difference that we see, so you'll see that there's a green area in the front of the brain that's circled. The difference that we see there between the 2 pictures is that the child on the top experienced over 1,200 conversational turns in a day, and the child on the bottom experienced less than half that much. And you'll notice that inside of that circled area, which is where the Broca's area is, that language center, there's much different levels of activation. And the Broca's area, again, a language center in the brain, is highly involved in speech and language skills for language production. So being able to say words, language comprehension, and even speech-associated gestures like signing. So the researchers found greater brain activation for children who experienced more conversational turns. This also related to differences in verbal scores on an assessment. Their scores increased by 1 point for every additional 11 conversational turns per hour. We've got a comment from Melissa in the chat saying, do we consider older siblings with conversation? And so maybe we've got some benefits to being the youngest child versus the oldest child. I will say, as the 3rd child myself, I think that there's probably a little bit of truth to that statement. That's just anecdotal. At LENA, when we use that talk pedometer, it typically doesn't measure older siblings unless they are much older, because it's distinguishing adult and child voices by frequency. And so my voice as an adult has a different frequency than the voice of a child. So when we're looking at conversational turns, we're really focused on those adult-child interactions. Because again, it's couched in that relationship of nurturing caregiving that's really important to developing those brains. And so we don't typically focus on older siblings, But at the same point in time, I know that, as a young child, my brothers were reading to me. I was hearing my mom talking and my dad talking to my siblings as well. So I was getting a much richer verbal experience. And that is certainly all part of the picture of a child's development. But you can also create that same level of enrichment and language for an only child or a first child. It probably just becomes a little bit more part of the routine when you've got multiple children in a household. And that's something you probably find in the classroom as well, is that you've got a lot of kids in there. And so you're talking all day to all of the kids. So there's a lot more of that than with just, if it's just one parent and one child interacting. So thank you for bringing that up, Melissa. And Natalie for chiming in with your experience as well. And we can certainly pop the note-taking sheet back in the chat one more time. So I know that if you had to log in and log out, those older chats have disappeared. Again, this research, all of the studies that we're talking about today, but this one as well, this is why at LENA, we like to say that words are good, but turns are better. So those words are important, but the really, really, really key part is the back and forth conversation. And as Dr. Romeo said in our conversations with her, conversational turns provide that feedback loop between adult and child, where the child is learning to adapt their speech to the adult model, and the adult learns how to talk to the child in the optimum way to advance their speech, but also so the child can understand. When we are engaging with the children in our care, we're teaching them how adults use language, but we're also learning more about their own level of development, which helps us then provide more scaffolding and supports that are just where they need them. So as caregivers in the classroom, we become experts on these tiny humans that are in our care, and we can give them an enriching environment for their little brains to reach their fullest potential. Let's also talk briefly about one of the other studies I shared. This is the 10-year study by LENA researchers that found the amount of conversational turns during the first 3 years of life, and particularly in that 18 to 24 month time frame, is related to children's later life outcomes. In this case, we were measuring 10 years later. And this publication marks the longest term longitudinal study on the relationship between interaction in early childhood and later life outcomes. The research looked at the impact of adult words and conversational turns and what that did for children's IQ, verbal comprehension, vocabulary, and other language skills. While the amount the adults talked to the children was important, again, the amount they talked with them, those conversational turns, was even more important. So caregivers like you have the power to make a difference. All of this research combined with scientific evidence about how brains develop makes it clear that by focusing on the earliest years of a child's life, we make a difference for a lifetime. Early talk is the key element in vocabulary development. Vocabulary development at age 3 is tied to school readiness, which strongly predicts third grade reading scores. And third grade reading scores have been found to be predictive of high school graduation rates, which in turn heavily influence life outcomes. In the words of author Erica Christakis in her book, The Importance of Being Little, it's not the words themselves that are so important, although it's no small feat to have a big word bank of things to talk about, but rather the process by which children learn to think properly through their use of words. Vocabulary is a vehicle for understanding, but it isn't the understanding itself. So this chain reaction of sorts is supported by neuroscience that tells us that both brain architecture and developing abilities are built from the bottom up, with simple circuits and skills providing scaffolding for more advanced circuits and skills over time. The higher levels of cognitive development needed to succeed in high school and beyond are more difficult if those lower level circuits, like those developed in preschool, aren't wired properly. For example, the ability to understand and then say the names of objects depends on earlier development of the capacity to differentiate and reproduce the sounds. And the circuits that underlie the ability to put words together, to speak in phrases, form a foundation for the subsequent mastery of reading a written sentence in a book. So stated simply, circuits build on circuits and skill begets skill. So those very early skills that we are developing are absolutely essential to a child's future. So what does all of this research mean for you as an educator? Whoop, jumped ahead. You can make a difference in these children's brains, not just making their days special right now, but creating lasting positive outcomes for them. Just by talking and engaging more with children, you're supporting their brain development to set them up for life. You can establish healthy conversation habits with children at any age. And research shows that staff knowledge and skills are among the most important determinants of the impact of early childhood programs. More important than any curriculum, special book or toy, field trip, or classroom material is you and the relationship that you are building with each child in your care. Through these interactions, you build a bond that helps you know more about the child, what they're interested in, what is comforting or upsetting to them, what makes them giggle, and what skills they're just about to develop so that you can help push them to that level. But let's be honest, again, it can be hard to talk to young children all day, every day. And there are a lot of things we have to get done. Ensuring that children are kept safe and healthy, following curriculum and schedules, abiding by protocols and guidelines. Adding in one more thing can feel like a burden. And so at LENA, our goal is to weave these brain-building conversational turns into all the things you are already doing, rather than adding on something else. So I'm not asking to set aside an extra 15 minutes a day or 30 minutes a day, or change any plans or routines. But like Henrietta just said, it is hard work, but it's really, really rewarding. And we hear that from teachers across the country that we work with, that as they are able to make these connections and really engage with the children, it's just light bulbs going off and personalities coming out, and you just nobody goes into early childhood if they don't like kids, and I think that this is definitely what all of us in the field find very rewarding, is seeing children learn and seeing those connections being made. So I'm going to share with you a way that we do that at LENA. So the talking tips, which are pictured here, we've dropped those in the chat a couple times. They were in the Sketch app as a download. You can also go to this website here and find the 14 talking tips. These were developed at LENA as an evidence-based way to increase interaction with young children. We use these both with parents in the home and with teachers in the classroom. Stacy has dropped the link into the talking tips as well. So you feel free to grab a copy of that. We're going to spend the next part of our session here talking about these talking tips and how we can use them in everyday routines. So make sure that if you need to stand up and stretch or take another big sip of your coffee, that you do so, so that we can have some great engagement and interaction as we go through this next part of our session. So the talking tips build on two evidence-based active ingredients: creating joint attention and recasting. So creating joint attention, that's pretty self-explanatory, that our goal is for the adult and the child to be engaged in the same activity, looking at the same thing, just really sharing an experience together. And this is really important to building conversational turns, because when we are engaged in something together with a child, There's so many natural and easy ways to interact that it really, just really opens up so many opportunities. So with talking tips like number 1, which is talk about what you're doing and thinking, it becomes easy to find a start to a conversation because you can just start talking about what's right in front of you, whether it's washing hands or cleaning up after a meal. With talking tip number 2, comment on what they're doing or looking at. You might find that you learn new things about the child and get a little window into how they're thinking by saying something like, "You're really concentrating on your painting. Tell me more about what this is." And so you are paying attention to what the child is paying attention to, and starting to engage around that. The second ingredient for the talking tips is recasting. So if you are unfamiliar with recasting, just think about this as taking what the child says and giving it back to them with added language. This builds vocabulary and language complexity. For example, the child might say ball, and you might say, "Yes, that is a big red ball. Can you roll it to me?" Or the child might say, "Read me." And you could respond with, "Oh, you want me to read a book to you? I would love to read with you. Why don't we go pick one out from the shelves? You can find one that you really like." So next, we're going to watch a short video about the talking tips. On your handout, again, there's a box for taking notes about ideas for using the 14 talking tips. So feel free to jot down anything you'd like to remember there. So fingers crossed, everybody, that our sound and video works for this. This short video is going to explain what the talking tips are and show examples of how they're used in early child care settings.
When an adult responds to a word or sound from a child, or the child responds to the adult, that exchange is a conversational turn. Turns have 6 times more power to grow children's brains than just adult words alone. Turns look different at different ages. In the first couple of months, the baby's side of the conversation is mostly gestures and cooing sounds. Later in the first year, children start making speech sounds and communicating for longer periods of time. And as children get older, they start using more words and building vocabulary. But at any age, increasing turns is a powerful way to build your children's brains during any activity at any time of day. To help you increase turns, we've developed 14 talking tips. These are simple but practical strategies to increase interactive talk while doing things with your kids. Most of the talking tips involve tuning in to what the kids are doing and responding to create interaction.
Thank you. What do you think? Kind of good. It's kind of crunchy, kind of salty.
Commenting on what they're doing. Repeating what they say or do and adding words to it.
Got a shovel? That's a good shovel. That's a big shovel. I like that one.
Following their lead and doing what interests them.
I colored on pink.
Oh, Jake, I already see an English muffin on your colored on your beige sheet.
Reading books together is a great time to use the tips to encourage conversations.
But when tadpoles grow up, what are they growing to?
But helping with clothing changes can be just as good an opportunity.
Unsnap it. Let's put your right arm in.
To help you practice the talking tips, we've prepared short videos of typical situations with early childhood educators interacting with their kids in everyday situations, like mealtime, clothing changes, outdoor play, and singing songs. You'll watch how real teachers use the talking tips in their classrooms, discuss how they use them, and look for opportunities when they could have used a talking tip but didn't. For each situation observed in a video, you'll get a handout you can use in your discussion with your coach. Afterward, you can post the handouts in your room as reminders or as an opportunity to share with parents. As you work with the talking tips more, they'll become second nature, and you'll see turns increasing on your LENA reports. More important, you'll see an increase in interactions with your kids every day. As you increase the number of turns with children in your room, you will earn stars on your reports and receive stars to display on the talking tips chart in your room. This can be another great way to start conversations with parents and talk about your LENA day. The 14 Talking Tips, powerful tools to help you build your children's brains.
Great. I'm glad the video worked for everyone. And Michelle and Sherry both commented in the chat about how this can relate to class scores, which I know you guys use in Louisiana. Absolutely 100%. So Stacy is going to drop a link into the chat. We have a webinar that we hosted with Dr. Sarah Haddon of Teachstone. I know she's also speaking at this conference. So if you are interested in learning more about how conversational turns and class go together and how we work with Teachstone on that, we have a great resource on that as well. So like the video showed, talking tips aren't something that we need to set aside a specific time of our day for, because we don't have time for that anyway. They are making a slight adjustment to what you're already doing to add in more of those brain boosting turns. So let's go ahead and launch our next quick poll for you to respond to. Just getting a pulse on what daily routine do you think you have the most interaction during right now? So what is most interactive in your classroom? What do you think, like, yes, this time of our day is highly interactive? Got some great responses pouring in. I'll give it a few more seconds here. Yeah, so our options are outdoor play, shared reading, meal times, transitions, indoor play, or clothing and diaper changes. Okay, we've got about half of our group has responded. So we'll give you a few more seconds here. If you haven't responded to the poll yet, go ahead and put in your answer. All right, so far and away, it looks like shared reading is the most interactive routine. And that is a great one. We'll talk about that one first. For building those interactions. So it looks like clothing and diaper changes, meal times, and outdoor play and transitions are where we've got a little room to grow there on building some interaction. And those are certainly times that it may feel harder to get those turns in because it's very task oriented. We're trying to get from A to B. We're trying to get the diaper changed. We're making sure everybody's got food in front of them and it's not on the walls. So we'll talk about some of those, but just be thinking about during those times where it is a little bit harder, what are some ways that we could maybe build some turns? So we will go ahead and keep moving through here. Let's see. So let's go through a few different routines and think more about what increased interaction might look like in those scenarios. And then we'll do 2 talking tip video exercises together. So first, let's talk about using talking tips while we're doing shared reading. So this is already a time of day that you guys feel is pretty interactive in your classrooms. And so let's think about some ways that we can build some of those turns. So if you have other ideas, be sure to be dropping those in the chat and have some conversation going along. So research shows that children who are read to regularly have a larger vocabulary than children who aren't read to regularly. Seems pretty common sense that the more that we're reading, the more words the children have. And I think about that with sometimes books are giving us words that we don't normally use in our day-to-day conversations and activities. So you might be talking about different kinds of animals where most of the time we're talking about our dog or cat at home. Or you might be talking about different types of geography or climates than the place that you live. So books give us more words than what we would maybe naturally come up with during the day. So again, it is a great opportunity to build vocabulary. Let's see, got a few comments about, is there a location we can access the conversation starters for the specific areas of the day? I'll have to check on that and see if we can share a couple of those with you guys. But we will send that out as a follow-up. We do, Stacy actually will share, we've got a blog post that we've been updating with resources throughout this coronavirus time that has some different resources there for you guys that you can access. So we'll put that link in. You don't have to be a good reader yourself to make reading a fun and enriching experience for the children in your classroom. When we work with parents, we typically use a video from Raising a Reader that shows that you don't have to read any of the words on the page, that it's really about sharing a positive experience with language and a great time to use talking tips. You don't have to read every word. You don't have to read any of the words. You don't have to read from the front cover to the back cover straight in order. You know, it's really that nurturing interactive experience that we're having with children. Like was pointed out here on the screen, we have an example of our conversation starter posters. These are what we use in our work with teachers in classrooms. So they can be posted in the classroom. Typically what happens is as a teacher is using the LENA program, working with a coach, every week they're talking about a different routine, and the coach will leave behind one of these posters in the classroom as kind of that physical reminder of some ways that you can increase interaction. So this poster shares some ideas like talking tip number 2, comment on what they're doing or looking at. You can ask simple questions about the pictures, like who is in the picture? And then you can build to more of those open-ended questions like Crystal mentioned in the chat. Like, what do you think will happen next? For babies, because we know that they maybe aren't responding to those questions quite yet, it's still important to ask those questions. Just give a little pause and then provide the answer. This is a great way to model language for them. So it's teaching them how to answer questions in the future. Talking tip number 3 is name things that they're interested in. Point out things that are meaningful to the child, like look at the children going down the slide in the picture. When we go outside, we can go down a slide too. Or, you know, if there's a dog in a book and you know that they have a dog in their home, you can, oh, look at that dog, it's cute and fluffy. Like, what's your dog like? Tell me more about that. Talking tip number 12 is following the children's lead. So go at a slower pace. Remember that babies' brains are processing speech at 1/5 the speed of adults. So reading slowly is also great. You don't have to keep up a certain pace. And then talking tip number 14, be silly, relax, have fun. If you're having fun, the children will too. So use different voices for different characters. Slow down to build suspense. Sing songs while you're, you know, that might go with the book. So if it's, you know, raining in the book, maybe we sing one of our songs about rain. And so really just making it fun and engaging. Does anybody have other comments or ideas or suggestions? I see in the chat that someone mentioned using question starters from the Wit and Wisdom curriculum to help get students talking. So yes, asking questions is really great for making reading an interactive experience. And then a comment about different reading levels for adults. But yeah, like books, you know, I remember as a kid, some of my favorite books were just picture books. There weren't any words anyway. And so I had one about Carl, the dog, and some the adventures he was going on. And so really looking at the pictures and seeing what's happening and asking questions and pointing out different shapes and colors. That's what shared reading is really key for. So let's move on to talk about interaction at meal times. I know this is one that you guys had commented was a little bit trickier. And there is certainly a lot going on at meal times, especially depending on how many children you're supervising and how much of the food prep that you're doing yourself. We know that meal times can also be a time that while all the kids are sitting and occupied, you can catch up on some of the to-dos or just take a few minutes break. But this is a time that has a lot of brain boosting potential. And so, if it feels like, yeah, I could maybe build some interaction during meal times in my room, let's talk about some of the ways that you might do that. So we've mentioned a few times that talking with young children and babies can be hard because we don't always know what to talk about. It's like, oh goodness, I don't really know where to start. But meal times give us a lot of great ideas for what we can talk about. So when we sit down with children, that's talking tip number 4, getting down to their level. So we're sitting with them. By naming the foods, drinks, utensils, or any meal prep items, you're using talking tip number 3, name things that they're interested in or commenting on what they're doing. There's also a lot of opportunity for recasting as you talk with the children about the food. They might say what's on their plate, strawberry or blueberry. And you could say, yes, these berries are delicious. They taste sweet and they're juicy. The raspberries are bigger than the blueberries. Or we have a big yummy scoop of beans on our plate. The beans are warm. We also have avocado. It's cool and squishy. You can ask them questions about the food. What does it taste like? Using action words to narrate, kind of like you're a sportscaster for lunchtime. Shannon's scooping up her peas using her spoon, and they go in her mouth. Oscar's picking up his toast with his fingers. Look at the way he grabs and lifts. So you can make it fun and use some narration. All right, let's see a few comments that people have shared about meal times. Kindergarten teachers have duty-free lunch, so you're not with them during mealtime and you don't have a snack time. That's amazing that you have a duty-free lunch. So I'm glad that you have that opportunity. And so this is certainly, we can think about other routines in the classroom where you can build some interaction. We have other people that say they eat with their kids every day. And so this is a great time to try and squeeze in a few more of those interactions. And Rhonda shared that she uses a strategy called turn and talk to discuss characters and events in a story. So students are interacting with each other as well as the teacher. It is sometimes hilarious listening to their conversations with each other and with me. I think that is certainly something we all love about little kids is sometimes you think like, I don't know how we got on this topic of conversation. But they're able to make such amazing connections and leaps. And I think that is a fun stage when they're starting to build that imagination. And it's just fascinating to watch their little minds working away. So that's a great suggestion, Rhonda. Another great way that we can build interaction is with singing. When you're not quite sure what to say, you can always sing. It's a great way to build turn taking. And just having some of those quick, easy little songs can also be really calming for kids. I find that with my own kiddo that sometimes when he's upset, row, row, row your boat is my go-to. And we change up the verses. So sometimes he's paddling his boat or bouncing his boat. So you can make them fun and silly. And kids love that repetition and having something that they know and are familiar with. So singing is a great time to be able to refocus and to create a shared activity together. With singing, like many other activities, getting down to their level is helpful. That is certainly a key talking tip that I find is helpful, is being on their level. Ginger agrees. She says it captivates and engages them so much. So with singing, maybe with babies, that means that we're lying on the floor, we're sitting in a circle with toddlers. It can be especially fun and can burn off some of that energy to use songs that have emotions that go with them. So Wheels on the Bus, we do the Itsy Bitsy Spider. And remember, you don't have to be Beyonce for your children to enjoy singing songs with you. I don't have the most lovely singing voice, but I know that my kiddo likes it and likes to hear it. It's that warm, responsive engagement. Sharing in the chat that we have songs for transitions. That is a great way, using, combining these singing and transitions. That was something that people said was harder. So having a song during transitions can help with that turn taking, where you're inviting the kids to sing along. So get them participating. Talking tip number 7 is wait for their response. You can use a song like Old MacDonald Had a Farm, and you sing the "On that farm he had a," and you wait for the children to shout out an animal. So things like that, where you're getting them engaged and building that response. Let's see, for older children, you might even encourage them to make up new words for the song. You might not have to encourage them. It might just be something that they do naturally. So build up a set of favorites for your classroom. Repetition is good. Kids love that, and it helps them to participate. They can fill in more words when they already know the tune. Let's see, so a few other comments we've had coming into the chat. Is when you change your voice, they try to change their voices also. So it's hilarious. Yep, you can do the low notes and do the high notes. And little kids love to play along with that. Let's see, including songs during brain breaks. And being aware of your facial expressions. Yes, this is an important thing. Like we talked about earlier, kids are taking in things with all of their senses. So, when we are engaging with them and interacting, when we're singing, when we're reading, having those facial expressions that match that warm, responsive caregiving are important to help children build the appropriate responses and brain architecture. When we do outdoor play, here are some other ways we can build turn taking. Sometimes when we're outside, everybody's kind of spread out and doing different things, but there's also, this is a great opportunity if you notice that maybe there's a couple of kids in your classroom that you feel you're having a hard time engaging with. Sometimes outdoors can be a great time to come alongside what they're doing and build some of those interactions. This is another example of one of our LENA Grow conversation starter posters that teachers receive in that program. So again, getting down to their level at the sandbox or the water table can help build those turns. Counting objects that we see, whether it's toys on the playground or things in nature like flowers or trees. We can wait for their response with a game like I Spy. So I spy something red. Give them time to look around and find something red. You can give them more prompts too. It's red and tall. And give them more time. It's red and tall and helps us move fast. It's the slide. And so that really helps them build that interaction and responding with you. You can ask them questions about what they see or talk about the weather. Outdoors is also a great time to be silly and get them moving, especially with a little bit bigger kiddos. With babies, talking about all of the things you're seeing outside and exploring the world is important. So that might be touching a leaf, talking about its color and texture. And remember, again, you can go slow. You don't have to talk about all the leaves. You don't have to circle the entire playground. For a baby, looking at one leaf for a longer period of time is perfectly fine. They're processing that speech slowly. They're taking in all of the way that they're seeing things, they're smelling things, they're feeling the breeze on their skin or feeling the warmth of the sun. They're hearing all the different sounds. They might be tasting some things. We've got to watch out when we're outdoors with them. So let's see. We have a comment in the chat that says, as an administrator, when I have a hard day, I always go into the pre-K classroom and interact with the kids for a pick-me-up. The interaction is also beneficial for adults, and that is so true. I know during this time with coronavirus and school closures and office closures, we're all just in such a different space. And so I am working from home here in my home office, and we've got our kiddo home with us. And it is nice to be able to pop out of my office and go read a book quickly. And it just changes your whole day when you get to have those interactions. And so we know that it's good for us, and it's even better for the kiddos. So what we're going to do next, we've talked about a couple different routines. We're going to watch a talking tips video. So during our LENA Grow coaching program, this is part of coaching sessions. Teachers are getting feedback reports from those talk pedometers. They're talking about different routines. And then we have these short talking tip videos to help see what other teachers may do in that same type of routine, and just have a conversation around, what do we see? What do we notice? What ideas might we take away? What other things might we have done in that situation that are different? So they're not perfect examples of, you should do exactly this. They're just a way to start a conversation. So the first video we're going to watch, let's see if I can get it to go forward. Okay, this video clip is showing outdoor play with toddlers, something that many of you do in your classrooms. This is from Miss Yolanda's classroom in Orlando. Together, we'll watch this interaction. And as you watch, just think about which talking tips you notice. If you have that 14 talking tips sheet in front of you, you might make a couple notes of which ones you see. And then we'll talk a little bit about that afterwards.
What you got, Mari? Huh? What you doing? A cup? What's this? There's some steak. Say steak. Say meat. Meat. What's this?
Apple.
Apple. Michaela, don't put that in your mouth. What's this, Michaela?
Plate.
A bowl.
Ball.
Yes, and this is a pitcher that you put water in. What's this?
Apple.
Apple. Beautiful, what you doing? Huh? Look what I got. You see that? Ooh.
It's eating.
Yeah, you want to play with it? You can play with it. Yeah, be careful, okay? You pouring the water out the pitcher. What's that in your hand? Beautiful. Mari, make sure you leave it over the table, okay? Who washed my apple? Where's my apple?
Right here.
Where? Give it to me. Oh, look at there. What color is it?
Right here.
What color is it? What color is this? Nari, what color is this? Red. Yeah, this is green. Look, Nari, this is green. Green.
All right. Now, I bet as you were watching that, you may have thought about what you might have said in that scenario with some kiddos. Maybe you had other ideas about how to interact or things that you do that work really well. Feel free to share some of those in the chat bar so we can all be learning from each other as we think about outdoor play and how to build interaction. I think for me, I saw talking tip number 10, take turns, don't do all the talking. I saw that one when Miss Yolanda was asking the children questions about what's this and giving them time to respond. And then she was filling in some answers to help them learn more vocabulary around these different types of objects they were playing with in the water table. Yep, so we see that she was asking questions, and number 8, imitating them. And so we see a lot of talking tips in that 1, 3, 5, 8, 9, 11, and 14. It's amazing when you start really breaking down interactions, how you can see those different techniques being put to use in small ways. She was having fun with them. She was, wee, making noises and talking about what they were doing. Absolutely. Remember, there's no right or wrong way to engage with your young children. So again, these videos that we use and what we're looking at here today, it's not, this is how you should do it. It's not prescriptive. It's really just giving us space to reflect on what's it look like when someone else is doing this, and how can we build interaction in these everyday moments that are already happening. When the kids are playing at the water table, we could be standing off to the side and saying, okay, you've got 5 minutes here, or 8 minutes, or 10 minutes here at the water table, and I'll be here to dry you off when you're done. Or like Miss Yolanda, we can be going up and interacting with them and really getting in and engaging. She did have such a happy and enjoyable voice, and you could tell from the way she was talking to the children that they have that nurturing, caring relationship. So let's watch one more. So that was a great example of playing with toddlers outside, toddlers, preschoolers. The next video we're going to watch is more about infants. So for those of you who work with younger groups of children, this one will be really relevant for you.
Cliff and his babies. Look, Envy. Look, Envy. Cliff and his babies. Cliff push his babies. Let's go, babies. Say Cliff. Look the babies.
Makes me have shoes.
Yeah, he's cute. Look, Cliff and Envy. Cliff slide his babies. Whee! Whee! Yeah, you see? Cliff feed his babies. Milk time. Look. Yes, you're going to give the butter. That's the baby. Yes, like you. And this is the other baby. The other baby. Isaiah, come here, papi.
He see all these people.
Cliff tucks his babies in. Look. They put in a box, they're playing. She have so fun. Yes, there's 2 babies. Come. Cliff gives his baby a big hug. Give me a hug. Give me a hug. You know how to do a hug?
Yep. Oh, you gonna hug the
You
book?
hug the book? Oh, that's good job. That's cute. Good job, Envy. And now Cliff going to sleep. Good job. Look, she going to sleep with the babies and the cat. Say bye-bye to Cliff. Say bye-bye to Cliff. Say bye-bye, Cliff.
Bye-bye, Evie.
Yay! You're so happy. Where are you going?
Yay, Evie!
The end. Yay! Did you like the book?
All right. So again, as you were watching that, you might have thought about things that you might have said and done, or different interactions. I think on that one, seeing talking tip 14 of be silly, relax, and have fun. But also just how encouraging she was of good job, and you know how to do it, and so really just that warm, caring interaction. Also seeing touch, hug, hold, where with little babies, a lot of the time we are just touch, hug, and hold is part of the talking tips, because it's creating that warm experience where they feel nurtured and cared for and able to interact. So yeah, she was so awesome at that. And you see the kids moving around, and there's different kids, and really being able to point out different things and expand upon the language in the book. So you may have noticed, that she wasn't reading all the words on the page, and she was adding in a lot of other things and relating it to things she knew about that child and what that child liked to do. And the babies were engaged with that. So that was an awesome example of using talking tips for shared reading, especially with little babies. So what are some other routines in your day that you think are opportunities for increasing interaction? Are there other times of the day that you think would be great opportunities to build more interaction? Think about that. Morning meeting, yes, that's a good idea. Morning circles, car rides, small group times. Yeah, these are all great examples. So again, here's the link again for downloading talking tips. Feel free to share this with other teachers you work with, or other people in your center that or school that you might think would be interested. For teachers that are using the LENA Grow Professional Development Program, they do post this in their classrooms as a reminder of ways to engage more. Some of them are using this as a way to share ideas with families as well of, hey, this week, I'm really working on building engagement with your child by using this talking tip, imitate them and add words. So here's an example of how I'm doing that in the classroom, and here's some suggestions for how you could also do that at home. So there's some great opportunities there to also use these as a way to help parents at home. So let's do a final poll. This will be our last one. We've got about 10 minutes left in our session. Which classroom routine can you increase interaction in using talking tips? So let's think about a goal of next time you're in your classroom, which routine are you really going to hone in on as a way to increase interaction? Great responses coming in. Oh, Ginger, I love that idea. Ginger shared that they have a greeting wall outside of the classroom. So when the students arrive, they choose which way they'd like to be greeted. Hug, smile, high five, etc. That is a great way to build language and help them be learning about different interactions and to really kind of meet them where they are that day. Some days might be a hug kind of day. Other days might just be a smile or a high five. All right, we're going to go ahead and close the poll. We've got about half of you guys participating. So you guys are saying transitions are a great time that you are going to use talking tips to build interaction. I love that. I love that one of the times that you guys said was hardest for interaction right now is one that you see the most opportunity in. So that is a great poll there. Thank you guys for sharing. So now as we think about, those goals that you guys are setting, let's talk briefly about goal setting and how you're going to take what we talked about today back into the classroom. There is on the handout, note-taking handout, that last box there is for goal setting. So please feel free to make some notes there. We've talked about the importance of conversational turns and the power that you have to make a difference. And you might be thinking, thanks, no pressure at all. It's only their entire future that we're talking about here. But let me assure you that that is not, not my goal for today's conversation to make you feel more pressure, more stressed. It may seem overwhelming to think, oh, well, I just need to talk all day, every day to all the kids in my room. But our goal at LENA is to make it just a sustainable habits that we're building. So in the LENA Grow program, we give feedback over a 10-week period with coaching sessions that are focused on specific routines. So again, breaking it down to take it one step at a time to build sustainable habits and practices that make this just part of the way that you teach, not something that you have to remember every day. This with LENA Grow, we again try and set those smaller goals, targeted and attainable. So this week we're going to focus on meal times and how to build interaction there. Or this week we're focusing on transitions and how to build interaction there. I love the idea about having songs specifically for transitions. And then the next week you're going to focus on clothing changes. So taking time to create new habits and focus on just one part of your day. Or for some teachers that are using our program, as they begin to dive deeper into the feedback reports they get, maybe that teacher is setting specific goals around a particular child that they notice are having lower levels of interaction. Okay, so this week, how can we involve Sophia in more of the classroom routines and activities? Maybe that means we need to have her sit in a different spot, or I just really need to be more intentional about asking her questions because I know she doesn't speak up. It doesn't mean that she's necessarily a quiet child. Maybe she just needs us to be the first to reach out. So setting goals that are realistic and attainable, maybe again around specific routines or children, maybe around your schedule or your room setup, but really setting those goals and writing them down can help put an intentional focus on interactions and revisiting those. So having set check-in points. And again, that's those LENA Grow coaching sessions we have. We revisit the goal from the last session. And so documenting those, we can notice growth over time. We have a few minutes here. We've got about 6 minutes left in our session. If there are any questions that are coming to mind or thoughts that you'd like to share here at the end, please feel free to drop those in the chat box and we will answer anything that we have time. I've also put my email up here and you guys I should have that, and I'll send a follow-up email through Sketch as well. But if you have any questions or comments or feedback, feel free to reach out to me directly. Let's see. If you're interested in learning more about LENA, I know I've mentioned a few things, but if you'd like to learn more, you can visit us online at lena.org. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We share lots of content and resources around interactive talk, ideas for building that. We share stories from the partners we work with across the country. We also have a newsletter you can sign up for so you can get information on a regular basis, but feel free to stay connected. And finally, before you guys leave for today, I just want to encourage you to give session feedback in Sketch. It takes less than a minute for you to do it. So on the session, there's just a thing that says rate this. So you can choose whatever expression matches your experience. And please leave optional comments. So if there are things we covered that weren't clear, or if there were things that you really would love to learn more about, that helps us send you great follow-up, and also to make sure that as we talk with more teachers around the country, we're sharing good information. So I do see a question from Crystal White. What was the title of the book you commented that you're reading currently for professional development? The book is called The Importance of Being Little. So I'm holding that up here. And it is by Erica Christakis. So it's really great. Our company does a book club for our staff so that we can continue to be learning more about early childhood and education systems. So the book we read before this was called Crawling Behind by Elliot Haspel. So we have a recent blog post on our website about our conversation with that book, which was really great about learning more about early care settings. So thank you all for taking time out of your morning. I hope that you all have a wonderful start to your summer, and that this fall, as we're learning more about what it's going to look like to come back to our kiddos, that the talking tips will be helpful for you as we work on building those little brains to keep learning, growing, and developing. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the conference, and I look forward to hearing your feedback. Thank you.